Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream instant reaction. This is going to be an interesting experience because I've not watched the Seahawks game in full nights. I was working on the Chiefs Cowboys game for national radio over here. So I can tell you that the Cowboys were dreadful and the Chiefs weren't a lot better. And it was nowhere near the kind of game that everybody was expecting on the broadcast over here. But I did have half an eye on the Seahawks game as it was going on. And Robbie, every time that I looked at that screen to see what Seattle was up to, it was bad news. It was a failed third down. It was a big mistake on defense. It just looked like an absolute disaster of a performance against an Arizona Cardinals team that was without Kyler Murray, that was without DeAndre Hopkins, that was without J.J. Watt, and probably without even more players. And they came to Seattle and kicked Seattle's ass. So, you've seen it. What was your take on it?
I'm going to give you kind of just this is my take on the game. Okay, this is exactly how it worked out. Rashad Penny gets the first carry of the game, takes it 18 yards, checks himself out of the game. That's it. What the hell? You don't get any carries. You're going to get all we heard is this team that Penny's going to get a bunch of carries. This is how this team is. He gets one carry.
So yeah. He checked himself.
Out
of the game.
First carry, got 18 yards. Great run, by the way. And then he's just like, yep, checked himself out. Did he get hurt? I don't know. It looked like he got another carry. What did he? He had 2 carries, 19 yards. Yes, first one was 18 yards. I think that just summarizes the whole Seattle Seahawks experience. It doesn't make any sense. This team is dysfunctional. They have no creativity on offense, no creativity on defense. This is the thing, is like you go out there and you do the same thing over and over and over, and nothing of it is working. You know, the defense, you drop 20 yards back and you're giving Colt McCoy 8 to 10 yard passes each time. Easy money. It was pathetic. It was sad. Watching the game was hard.
Well, listen,
I don't know what to say, man. It's time for a new regime to come in and take over. This is it. This is done. I mean, and I posted on there. Somebody even just commented on it. You live long enough to play the hero, or you die playing the hero, or you live long enough to play the villain. And Pete's becoming the villain now. The boo birds were out. I had friends texting me saying this is terrible. Too many people were pissed and booing like crazy. I mean, 2nd and 6, weird pitch that, I don't know, miscommunication. All of a sudden you're at 3rd and 20, and then you do a draw play to Travis Homer. Go out there. You have a franchise quarterback. You have 2 stud wide receivers. Give them an opportunity to pick. Maybe you get a penalty. Giving up on plays pisses me off. I can't stand it. It's just, I'm over it, dude. It's just, was a terrible game.
Well, absolutely, it's clear that Pete Carroll has to go, and we've been saying that for a while. And a performance like this validates it. And we're going to flesh that out a little bit more. I know it's a topic that we've been talking about for a long, long time, Robbie, but we need to get into it again. But can you just sort of fill me in a little bit here? Because what I was watching, again, I've been focusing on the Cowboys-Chiefs game. I have not been watching the Seahawks game. I've seen bits of it. I've seen what people have been saying on Twitter. I've not been following this game along. But every time that I had a look or was seeing what people were saying on Twitter, it felt to me like Pete Carroll was doing what he was doing in the second half of last season, that he was trying to play a game a certain way to keep things close, to try and, muddy things a little bit, shorten the game, and try and win a scratchy game, which is what he tried to do in Green Bay. They almost pulled it off. It was 3-0 deep into the 4th quarter. They tried to do that against the Saints. They almost pulled it off. It was a 3-point game in the end. And I suppose you could argue right until that final dagger in the heart drive by Arizona at the end there, it was a 3-point game right in the 4th quarter too. That's the kind of thing I can imagine Carroll saying. Is that accurate? Was it a typical Carroll's trying to play it his way type of game? Because if it is, Robbie, I mean, I think I saw Jackson Bevan's tweet. There's a lot of things that we can tolerate, but being boring and losing, you can't tolerate that. When the Seahawks were exciting under Carroll and Russell Wilson, they'd have messy games. They'd drop games they shouldn't win. But for the most part, you'd never accuse them of being dull. This just looks like a bad team playing boring football with a head coach who has got no creativity. His philosophy is awful. It's boring. And they have no idea how to scheme players in their offense to have an impact. They've got no idea. I was watching a few plays. Colt McCoy would do a little bootleg. He'd buy a bit of time. There'd be route concepts which would get people open. He'd have easy completions. It seemed like he moved the ball pretty much at will. Where's that for the Seahawks? Every single yard gained by the Seahawks seems to be an absolute chore, Robbie. Is any of this accurate?
Oh, 100%. And let me just say, the Seattle defense made Colt McCoy look like the MVP of the league. It was pathetic. He just chipped away all the way down the field, and it's this the bend but don't break defense does not work if your offense isn't putting up points and your defense isn't actually breaking. I mean, yeah, what did they score? 23 points. Still, it's too much for a Colt McCoy offense to just charge up and down the field like it was nothing. It was sad. I mean, yeah, you had old AJ Green, you had Zach Ertz. I mean, this is just it's so frustrating. And yeah, I mean, it was absolutely just pathetic to watch. And there's you're spot on. There's no creativity at all. Like on either side of the ball, like the blitzes, you can see them coming. They don't make any sense when they do it. You know that no one's buying the play action anymore because our running backs suck. Like it doesn't make any sense. I don't know what we're doing. It's a very frustrating game to watch.
Okay, I'm having a look at the stats here. So Arizona had 29 first downs, Seattle 16, Seattle 2 of 10 on third down. And this is a big issue. And I saw a lot of people talking about it on Twitter that Russell Wilson and the Seahawks in general, Robbie, are just a horrendous, worst team in the league on third down. They can't stay on the field. And again, there was one third down play that I did see. And again, you can maybe fill me in a little bit here, Robbie, but it was a 3rd and 7. And it seemed like Russell Wilson was trying to throw a bubble screen, I think, was it DJ Dallas? I don't know if it got tipped or whatever it was. It just seemed like as soon as Wilson dropped back and looked in the direction of DJ Dallas, I thought this is not going to work. This is just not going to work. And I'm thinking on a critical 3rd and 7 play, you're deep into the game at this point. It's not the opening drive where you maybe say, okay, we've spent a week working on this. We've seen something that the Cardinals do. We can exploit this. We'll try this bubble screen with DJ Dallas. This was deep into the game here. We need to stay on the field. We need to make a play. And that's what you go to. There's no clever little scheming there to get DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett or Gerald Everett involved. There was one play in the Green Bay game earlier today at Minnesota where Matt LaFleur had Randall Cobb come in as a wildcat read option quarterback, take the snap, run to the left, and then he could pitch it to A.J. Dillon or he could keep it if the defense showed a certain look as he took the ball, Robbie. Pitched it to A.J. Dillon, got a first down, and the commentators were saying Matt LaFleur will have had that up his sleeve all game. They'll have worked on that, and he's picked the perfect time to pull that play out of the bag when they needed a first down. And as I was watching that, this was before the Cardinals game kicked off, I'm thinking, that would never happen in Seattle. They'd never have that one special play that's just something as simple as Randall Cobb taking the handoff instead or taking the shotgun snap instead and pitching it to A.J. Dillon. They'd never do that. They'd never do anything like that. They just want to keep things tight. We'll punt at midfield because we'll pin them back and we'll keep it a tight game. And you never know, Russell Wilson might pull it out of the bag in the 4th quarter. I don't want to watch this anymore. I don't think anybody wants to watch this anymore. And the win against Jacksonville and the Russell Wilson struggles has pushed some of the criticism and attention towards Russell Wilson. And a lot of fans this week have been questioning whether Carroll should stay and Wilson should go. Because a few of them have been tweeting me. You can't. No. We've just watched Cliff Kingsbury scheme a game for Colt McCoy, who was practically retired at the end of last season, Robbie. If you're telling me that Cliff Kingsbury can get a song out of Colt McCoy, and if Sean McVay can get a song out of Jared Goff, and if Kyle Shanahan can get a song out of Jimmy Garoppolo and take him to a Super Bowl, I want a coach. I don't want to get rid of the quarterback. I want a coach who's going to get Russell Wilson back to the top. I want a coach who's going to come in and is going to work with Russell Wilson. Now, there are 3 coaches in the NFC West right now who can do more with less. We've got a coach and a setup that who's doing less with more.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so here, let me talk about this as well. I mean, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, this is what I want. I don't blame people for who are like, I'm at the point now where I understand where people are like, get rid of Russ, get rid of the whole thing, blow this whole damn thing up. Let's start over. I understand it. I'm not there. I don't think that's what we should do. I think you're right. Let's go get a quarterback that, or go get a coach that can, use Russ's strengths and get him out of the pocket. Those kind of things like really help him be, a top tier quarterback. Let me tell you my problem. The first quarter, just right out the gate, pissed me off. The Colts Colt McCoy, Colt McCoy drove the Cardinals down. It was like a 9.5 minute drive in the first quarter. 9.5 minutes. It took up the whole quarter. It was almost like the time of possession today. Seahawks had the ball for 19 minutes and 38 seconds. The Cardinals, 40 minutes. 40 minutes.
And just
you're telling me the offense can't stay on the field for a little bit longer? I mean, no, the defense was on the field for 40 minutes.
And just remind me, who was the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals again today? Colt
McCoy.
Colt McCoy. Okay. And at running back, they had James Conner. They brought in for cheap from Pittsburgh, who was a free agent. And Eno Benjamin's running the ball.
Yeah, Zach Ertz looking like he was playing back at Philly way back in the day, just kicking our ass.
Yeah, it's time. It's time. And, I'm sort of looking at the quotes that are coming in. Char's posting some of these. Pete Carroll starts his press conference with, "I don't have a lot to tell you. Just ask your questions, go." Well, listen, we talk a lot about the media, don't we? And I've complained about it in the past. I have to do 3, 4, 5 interviews a week, Robbie. If I was in that press conference right now, I'd be saying to Pete Carroll, does this feel like the end of an era? And I'd be asking him whether he intends to carry on after this season. It's a fair question.
Absolutely.
It's a provocative question, perhaps, and people would raise an eyebrow because those kind of questions don't generally get asked around here. But it's a question that needs to be asked right now. And I think it's time for somebody to put their head above the parapet and ask that question, because this cannot carry on. And look, everything's on the table. Everything's on the table. But ownership has to have a plan, Robbie. If they've determined that, okay, Russell Wilson's going to go in the offseason, and it may be that Russell Wilson makes that decision for Seattle. If he requests a trade, you're probably going to trade him. It's as simple as that. I don't think this franchise is in a position to battle through the way that Green Bay did with Aaron Rodgers and say, okay, you want to trade, we're not doing anything. I don't think they've got the ability to do that. So if Russell Wilson asks for a trade, he's going to be gone, Robbie. But I think that if you intend to keep Russell Wilson, you need to put a plan in place now so as soon as that season finishes, you can convince him to stay here with the plan that you've put in place. And if your decision is to trade Russell Wilson, you still need to have a plan as to how you're going to progress forward with that. Because quite frankly, I don't know how anybody can sit here and go, okay, I don't want Russell Wilson to be the quarterback anymore. I think it needs a massive, when people make this point, it needs a massive rebuild. He's your greatest asset to get some draft picks. Move him on, start again, start from scratch. I don't buy into that. Some people do. But if you do buy into that, there's no way that you can be saying, and by the way, Pete Carroll's making those picks. There's absolutely no way that Pete Carroll and John Schneider, the architects of this, can be in charge for this again. And people can, and we'll look at this, Robbie, and I'm sure as it gets debated more and more, and people flesh this out, people will go, well, look at Matt Jones. That's the New England way of doing things has to be it. They move on from Tom Brady. They get spend a bunch of money that they're saving, not paying a quarterback on your Hunter Henrys and your Matt Judons, and they right the ship in that regard, and then they bring in Matt Jones on a rookie contract, and it clicks. But the big difference between Seattle and New England is the New England Patriots have Josh McDaniel. And Josh McDaniel might be a crappy head coach. He might think that he's mini Belichick, like a lot of these guys do who work with Belichick, and he may not ever be a good head coach for that reason. But I'll tell you something, he's a fantastic offensive coordinator, and he schemes properly, and he maximizes weapons, and a bit like Kyle Shanahan, he'll call a play, you've just got to read it and make the play. It's a perfect system for Matt Jones. As it would have been with Shanahan, it is with Josh McDaniel. The Seahawks don't have that. You can't ask a rookie quarterback to come in and play Pete Carroll football unless you're going to pair him with Marshawn Lynch, which is what they had with Russell Wilson. And it's pretty evident that the Seahawks don't have that superstar running back that will enable this offense to run through that running back and then allow Wilson to play this way that Carroll seemingly wants him to play. And by the way, that's another topic we should discuss. I hear that Jonathan Taylor had a great game today, 5 touchdowns, seems to be in the MVP conversation. And it was, I retweeted the video, Robbie, that I posted a week or two before the draft about how badly Jonathan Taylor wanted to be a Seahawk, which he did. Check my Twitter timeline at Rob Staton if you missed that video. And the Seahawks, we don't need Jonathan Taylor. We don't need any of that. We'll take a linebacker instead and replace KJ Wright with a first-round pick. I mean, I'm not saying that Jonathan Taylor would have cured a whole bunch of ills, this team. They may still be in a bad state, Robbie. But you put Jonathan Taylor in this offense, I think it's pretty different. Right now they're kind of scrambling together. Rashad Penny, a bit of Alex Collins, but neither of them can stay healthy. DJ Dallas, Travis Homer. That ain't good enough to play the way that Pete Carroll wants to play. And this is the thing. They have contradicted the philosophy that Pete wants to run with by building this team in a really confusing way. We'll go and trade everything for a safety and give him $18 million a year. We'll go and draft a linebacker in the first round, but then we'll forget about the running game, which is absolutely dreadful. But you want to run the ball as your sort of focal point of the offense and make Russell Wilson a point guard. It ain't going to work. And this is not to excuse Russell Wilson, who's not playing well. Definitely not doing that. But for me, I have studied this quarterback class. I don't want to move on from him yet, Robbie, with at least trying him with an offensive coordinator, offensive-minded head coach, rather. And hey, maybe Josh McDaniels should get a try. I don't know. No one ever talks about him as a head coach anymore, Robbie. Nobody likes. John Clayton calls him Joshy Boy. He doesn't like him at all. Part of me wants Josh McDaniel in Seattle just to see John Clayton's reaction to that. It'd be great. I don't know. There needs to be a change, though.
Yeah, just speaking of the running back situation, it's so frustrating because I don't want to be one of the guys that's like, oh, I told you so. But you and I talked about this offline. Like, I just didn't want Chris Carson back. I just didn't. And I just knew. I just had something in my gut told me that he was going to get hurt. I mean, he'd been hurt every year of college, every year of pros. I still can't get over his fumbling problems that he had that one year. I had nothing against him. I know he runs hard. He was a hard player, but just didn't want him. I wanted to see us go out and attack the running back position in a different way. And I just didn't think he was the answer to the problem that we were having. And here we are. He's injured again. We got Rashad Penny checking himself after one carry and then not getting another one. And you got Alex Collins, who, by the way, who was playing decent, but I mean, he's probably getting way too many carries and he's tired. And I don't know. The running back position, you look at Jonathan Taylor today and he might not have solved all the problems, but he would be a damn hell of a good player in our system right now.
And he wanted to be here.
And he would help us tremendously in the running game.
Here's the other thing. So I'm just having a look at Twitter here, Robbie, and seeing what people are saying. And this is the thing. Pete Carroll has no answers. The journalists are asking, why is this not working? Why is the offense not being able to convert a third down? Why is the offense looking so bad? He has absolutely no answers. This is one of his quotes. It's really surprising. We had such a hard time scoring and throwing the football. It's what it's been like, and it hasn't gotten better. And then he abruptly walks out of his press conference. He just ended the press conference and walked out. He has no answers. But this is exactly what was happening last year. Cast your mind back to the Washington football game at the end of the season when Joe Fan asked Pete Carroll, why can't you convert third downs? Why are you struggling to finish off games in the fourth quarter? And his answer was, well, if you want to worry about that, you can. We're not worried about that. Well, you should have worried about it because it cost you your season in the end. That's what happened in the Rams game. It was a massive honking problem that Pete Carroll didn't address until the season was over. And now the season's over after 10 games, and he's still got no answers. He has no answers. This is a man who has got no answers or solutions to the problems. He's just got his way of playing football, and if it ain't working, then that's that. And it's time. I'm sorry, it's time. I really hope that we're just going to hear very soon that he's decided that this is his final season. He's going to retire, so that we can say thank you, Pete, rather than have conversations like, I don't want to go through another 7 weeks of this, Robbie, of us coming on here and talking about, because I think this is going to get worse before it gets better. Because there's a chance, if they lose to the freaking Lions, for example, what if they give the Lions their first win in the season and end their winless run? What if they end up losing? I mean, look, it even seems like the Niners suddenly look pretty competent. You could get absolutely blown out in San Francisco. All of these things. I don't want to go through these games, Robbie, and come out here and then us be talking and hammering Carroll because we don't know whether he's going to step down or not. Just say you're retiring. I'm sorry, you've got to go. Just make the decision for the franchise. Give Jody Allen or Chuck Arnold or whoever it is in these anonymous people in this ownership group who we never ever hear from, make them go and make a choice here. Is Schneider your GM? Is Wilson your quarterback? Is Carroll your coach? Take that one out and then let them get on with the other two so that when January comes around, day one of the offseason, Robbie, we know who the coach is going to be because they've gone out and landed him. What did they do when Jim Mora went? That was not an on-the-whim decision. Paul Allen knew he was going to do that weeks before the season finished. He had made his mind up. He knew they weren't going to get anywhere with Jim Mora. And he didn't just ring Pete Carroll up and then say, do you fancy the gig, Pete? And he turned up the next day in Seattle and said, yeah, go on, then I'll give it a bash. That's not how that would have happened. That would have been talks over a serious period of time. And Pete will have agreed to that long before it became public knowledge when Jim Mora was fired. And Pete Carroll stepped in straight away. They have got to get this appointment right. And when the Seahawks have got things right, Mike Holmgren, Pete Carroll, it's because an inspired owner has gone out and landed a big fish, a big move that gets you saying, yes, I think this is going to be exciting. It just felt right with Holmgren and it feels right with Carroll. They've got to go and do it again, Robbie. They can't just be one of these teams that the season finishes and they're one of 6 or 7 looking for a head coach and they interview 4 or 5 different coordinators and then they kind of accidentally stumble into one of these guys. It can't be that. They've got to go out and land someone. They've got to go, come and sort this out. And it needs to be somebody who gets you out of your seat as soon as you hear the name.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And you talk about, playing the Lions or the Niners. I mean, shoot, we got the I almost said Redskins. We got the Washington football team coming up, and they're not that good, but they're 4-6, and they're playing.
They're playing well.
No, they're playing well under Ron Rivera, and it seems like this is a Monday night game. This is like I remember when Pete Carroll, you just Monday night games or any sort of primetime games, you just like, oh, the Seahawks are going to come to play. Like just it's a primetime game, they're going to come out and they're give it their best and they're going to be, a force to be reckoned with. I'm not confident in beating the Washington football team at all. There's no. I have no confidence in the next game at all.
Slap $10 on Washington for me, Robbie.
Yeah, I mean it's just crazy. But you're right. At this point, we need something needs to change, and I think really Pete does need to come out and do exactly what you said. To say, hey, at the end of the season, stepping down. It's gonna be my last season, and let us look forward to something. But realistically, that isn't gonna happen. That's not Pete's style. If anything, he'll come down and say something maybe at the end of the year. But
Robbie, I cannot.
I don't even know what to say, man. I don't even know what else to say.
It's okay, Robbie. I cannot, and I think I speak for a lot of Seahawks fans here. I cannot engage with this team if they go through an off season of Carroll just cracking on with a job and us having another Russell Wilson saga, which gets ugly, and us having to sort of pick through that for weeks, and then either there's like a forced you're not going anywhere, or and I don't think that would happen, or he's moved, and then we get to see Pete Carroll and John Schneider muddle their way through another free agency in the draft. I can't do that. I physically have not got the desire to write about this team every day during the offseason if that's what the solution is. And I think the problem that the Seahawks ownership have got here is I don't think a lot of fans are going to accept that. I think that you get to a point where your customer base, your fan base turns. And it feels to me, based on what you've said and what I've read on Twitter about the boos, about the reaction to this game, about the way that Pete Carroll has acted at the end of his press conference, just basically stormed off after 7 minutes, that we've reached that point where no change will not be acceptable for this franchise. It is just, it's fallen apart. We've reached the end of an era. We had a couple of super chats about
just
10
real
minutes
fast.
ago.
You heard it tonight. You could hear it on the radio, on the TV station. The Boo Birds were out every time they punted, every time they did something stupid. Russ missed it he had a golden opportunity to score a touchdown. He had two guys open in the end zone. Gerald Everett coming across the middle, and then he had Freddie
Yeah, I
Swain in the
saw
back,
that play.
and he threw it way high, out of bounds, third
Out of
down.
bounds, yeah.
And instead of like even try to like buy time, he just chucked it up, like
Just
knew, oh,
gave
called
up,
it
yeah.
good, gave up, and everyone was booing. It was just a terrible play all around. But I mean, you heard it. You heard it. The Boo Birds were out. The fans are starting to turn. I mean, you see it all over Twitter. You see it all over, the draft blog. Any sort of Seahawks website you go to, you're going to see it. So, yeah, it's time. Let's go to Super Chats. Go for it.
Yeah, do you know what? As you were talking, there's one last point I want to make before we get into this. And again, this comes back to sort of how Carroll has built his team. He has been so muddled since this reset. He's had no idea. He's neither gone all in on we're now a quarterback driven team, we're going to go all in. Russ, what do you want to do? He's not gone all in on that. And he's not gone all in on this is what I am, this is what I do. And really, if Pete Carroll wanted to run his team the way that he wants to run his team, they should have just called around and said, who's going to trade for Russell Wilson in 2018? Bear in mind, this was before he had the trade clause in his contract. So they could have traded him to the Bills and he wouldn't have been able to do diddly squat about that, by the way. They could have traded him to Cleveland and he wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. They could have gone and drafted Josh Allen, who was apparently the player that they wanted. He's not looking that great this year, by the way. But, if that's who they wanted, go and do that. Or go and get your Ryan Tannehill type, or go and trade for a veteran who can hold the fort, and then go and get yourself a bloody good running back. And if you know what, and if you think Rashad Penny's the best in the class, fine. But then admit your error. A year or two in, know that he's not the guy, and go and get your Jonathan Taylor and just run your team that way. That's how you want to run your team. You run your team that way. But it's like it's half a foot in the we want to build with Wilson and we kind of want to keep him on side. We want to do this. And it's half, well, this is what I want to do. And then it's kind of like, okay, Russ, we've got you. We're going to pay you $35 million a year. We're going to make that massive investment in you. But by the way, we want you to run this archaic offense that is stuck in 10 years ago, 20 years ago style, nowhere near modern enough. We want you to basically just keep the game tight and then do your thing in the fourth quarter, which is how Greg Olsen phrased it on Fox before the Rams game. That, is it no wonder that things have gone wrong? One of the things that really pleased me about Carroll, Robbie, when he came in, was that I never felt that we knew what the Seahawks were under Jim Mora. They had no identity. What were they trying to be? What were they trying to be under Jim Mora? They had absolutely no idea. And when Carroll came in, it was, this is what I want to be. This is what I am going to deliver with this team. This is what I'm going to set out to achieve. And that was that. And that was great. And they nailed it in that first run, that first build. But in this reset, they're not doing what Carroll wants. They're not doing what Wilson wants. The identity is completely muddled. The running game's dreadful. The defense is bad, as much as people want to talk it into existence. I think it was like 21st per DVOA, even with the good performance in the last few weeks. So it's not as good as some people have been saying. It's just nothing like Carroll's vision, and it's nothing like Wilson's vision. It's a nothing. It's just a bad football team. And they need somebody to come in now, and this is why Schneider needs to probably move on as well, who's got fresh, new ideas and can go, this is what we're going to be, this is what we're going to build towards, with that same direct clarity that Carroll had in 2010.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like, when Pete first came in, he was so close to the college game. He knew all these players. I mean, there was that big shock that they took Earl Thomas over Taylor Mays. But I mean, you think about it, Pete came in with fresh eyes and knew what he wanted to do, but he was so close to the college game at the time that bringing all these players in that were, turned out to be legendary defensive players. Now it's way past time. He's gone past them. Yeah, let's go ahead and go to the super chats, Rob.
This one from Charles. You see, I love this one because Charles has not only very kindly stumped up $5 for a super chat, but he's also started his comment with, you said it best, Rob. I like those comments. They're best. We get less with more up here, whereas the other three NFC West teams have a polar opposite situation. Very true, Charles. Thank you for your support, as usual, for that super chat from Charles there. Kerry, big supporter of the channel. Colt McCoy, Seahawks Slayer. He is 3-0. Against the Seahawks after today. And do you know what? Part of me worries, Robbie, if Pete Carroll sticks around after the back of that performance, Colt McCoy will be the starting Seahawks quarterback in 2022. Oh, my word. And this one from Marcus. Would you be willing to let Pete remain VP of operations and appoint a new head coach, or does he need to bow out totally? Marcus, I'm going to say this as firmly and as directly as possible. If Pete Carroll's going, he has to go. He is the biggest meddler in the NFL. He cannot delegate. He has to have control over everything. It's why he's in Seattle. If he was VP of operations, I promise you, he'd be down on that bloody practice field, trying to chat to all the players, trying to do everything. He'd have his fingers over absolutely everything. Pete needs to go and be back in California. He can stay in Seattle, but only on a watching brief. He cannot be in any way connected to the franchise. I'm sorry. That's no disrespect to him, but he can't let things go. And frankly, I don't want him appointing one of his friends or one of his sons or one of, Ken Norton Jr. This is also part of the problem, Robbie, is that, he brings back Tater. Like, why? He brings, okay, we need more accountability. I'll bring back Carl Smith to be quarterbacks. What is that? Do you know? Seeing your kids run around in the background there, Robbie, at least is bringing a smile to my face. That is just bringing some unbridled joy.
Good. They're planning on doing circles around this little basement area.
That is awesome. At least they're having a good time, more so than the dad and the dad's stream partner here. But he brings back Tater Smith. He's got a coaching staff which had two of his sons, now only has one. It's full of his guys. He's not gone out and got an all-star staff. And I kind of feel I'm ready to see either a head coach that is very offensive-minded, Robbie, and goes and gets an expert defensive coordinator, or at the very least, I want to see an overseer, a culture setter who will go, okay, I'm going to be in charge, a Harbaugh type. I'm not saying that they go and get the other Harbaugh from Michigan, but in Baltimore, he was a special teams coach. He appoints an offensive coordinator. Whether you think Greg Roman's doing a good job or not, that's up to you. But he appoints an offensive coordinator and says, get on with it. He appoints a defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, says, get on with it. And he just leads. I'll have a situation like that. What I don't want is Pete Carroll and his cronies and his friends and his philosophy anymore. It's time to move on.
Yeah, fresh regime, fresh eyes, everything needs to be different. Yeah, you're right, 100%. You can't bring these guys in that are just going to, repeat what Pete does. Yeah, home office life, Mike. You're right. And I am streaming from my bomb shelter. No, it's just my basement, unfinished basement in my house. So that's why I'm it'll be finished at some point.
I'm loving the hat though, Robbie. When it comes to the hats, you are an all pro in that regard. Here is Charles. I love the fact your kids one day will be old enough they can jump on and have a moan about the Seahawks as well.
Oh, I hope so.
Here's Charles. By the way, thanks to you two for these post-game therapy sessions. It absolutely buffers the anguish. Charles, thank you. And look, thank you for the super chat. Yeah. It is very much appreciated. Look, I wanted to talk a little bit about this as well, Robbie. And if people have got questions and they want a super chat, we'll do a quick fire Q&A as well at the end. So super chats will definitely get the questions in there. But if not, we'll just run through some Q&As to finish. But I've been watching the quarterbacks a lot this week again, Robbie. I did a big piece where I think I mentioned to you off air that I was going to eventually put some thoughts down on the quarterbacks, and I mustered the enthusiasm to do it this week. And then I went back and watched a few more games of Carson Strong, who's the Nevada quarterback. And then I watched Kenny Pickett's game earlier today from yesterday, where he had 4 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And, Ian Rappaport put a tweet out earlier, Robbie. I don't know if you saw it, saying it's considered a down year for quarterbacks. But speaking to GMs, at least 3 or 4 are going to go in the first round. And I looked at that and I thought, right, okay, let's just break down what this is. First of all, that's indicative of what the issues are in this draft. It is not a good draft in the first round at any position. So inevitably, teams are going to reach for quarterbacks because they're going to go, well, we don't like this guy. We don't like this guy. We might as well just take a quarterback and have a shot to nothing to see if this guy can be a franchise quarterback for us. So that's one reason why the quarterbacks are going to go early. 2, I suspect there's probably a bit of maneuvering going on here. That there are plenty of teams, Robbie, that are going to be in the veteran quarterback market. Your Clevelands, your Pittsburghs. My mind has gone completely blank and I can't remember any of the others. New Orleans, there are a lot of teams. You have to trust me. There are a lot of teams that are going to be looking for veteran quarterbacks. It works for them for there to be a bit of more buzz than there is about the quarterbacks. They can get that price down, and because anybody who's going to be selling a quarterback is going to say, "How the heck are we going to replace Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson? You need to give us more." and they'll go, well, there's 3 first-round quarterbacks in this draft. It helps you with the bargaining. So I think there's a bit of that as well. But then I read the piece, and I just Carlson's strong, very good arm, very quick with his reactions, getting the ball out. But he's an absolute statue, and that knee injury, Robbie, is a massive issue, red flag, that's going to be looked at. The reports on that are not good at all, and he can't move. And that's a problem. And in the NFL, if he was playing in Josh McDaniels or Kyle Shanahan's scheme, he'd be good. In Pete Carroll's, he'd be an absolute walking disaster zone. And then you've got Kenny Pickett, who has not got the arm strength, is hesitant in the pocket, but is a little bit more mobile and gets around, and he can throw on the run. And he's been creative and he's been good this year. But to me, he screams Drew Lock, and should go in the same range that Drew Lock went in. I don't think there's anybody who wants a first-round quarterback. You cannot tell me that Malik Willis is a second-round quarterback, let alone a first-round quarterback. Desmond Ridder's going to be a mid-rounder. Someone on this article that I report was saying Sam Howell's right up there as a first-round quarterback. I thought, well, which team's saying that? Is it Kansas City or another team that doesn't need a quarterback? You know, is it the Rams who are saying that? Because who the heck's going to take him in the first round? I'm sorry. No. So I just, you can't sell me on this. You cannot sell me on trading Russell Wilson, even if you got 3 first-round picks this year from the Eagles, let's say. You can't tell me that they need to spend one of those on one of these quarterbacks in the first round. You cannot convince me of that. And that's what I keep coming back to. However much you dislike Russell Wilson's Twitter posts, people, however much you think Russell Wilson's garbage on third down, however much you think Russell Wilson has been really bad and may even be finished based on the way he's played at the end of last season and the way he's played this season so far, you've got to take a chance with him with an offensive-minded coach. You have to see what that is like, because plenty of people have written quarterbacks off before. Phillip Rivers was written off. Aaron Rodgers was written off when he won 6 games and threw 20 touchdowns. 2 years later, he's the MVP. Give up on quarterbacks like this at your peril. That's what I would say about that. And yet, Robbie, the roster's just so bad that just persevering with Russell Wilson just makes me think that he's not going to want any part of that anyway.
I mean, that's the thing. He might not want to be here anyways. My guess is he's going to say, I don't care who you bring in. The roster is terrible. You know, it's not, there's nowhere to go. I mean, he's going to, you know, he already put the offensive line on blast last season, and we didn't really, I mean, we got Gabe Jackson and we didn't do anything at the center position. So he's not going to be super stoked about wanting to come back under a new regime. And does he want to be part of a rebuild at, 33, 34 years old? He probably wants to go to a team where he feels like his skills will be utilized better, and he can, it's got a team in place that's ready to compete now and not wait 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, I just wish there was a really convincing candidate that you could say, okay, I really believe in that. Somebody who's been a head coach, who has got a bit of magic to them. There's very few people that spring to mind like that. I think the Seahawks would find it really hard to convince someone like Lincoln Riley to leave Oklahoma and come to Seattle. He would be somebody who would get people excited. Whether it would work or not is another matter. But he's somebody that would get people somewhat excited. And in the NFL right now, we were talking about people like Joe Brady and Brian Daboll. Their teams have been losing games, and Josh Allen's not had a good year. And the Panthers are back to Cam Newton now and hoping that he's going to produce some magic because the offense has really gone off a cliff. It's hard, and I've said out there, let's go and get somebody who can get the offense going. And the names that are coming back, somebody sent me a tweet, Robbie, saying Brian Daboll, Joe Brady, Lincoln Riley, Doug Peterson. And of those, I think that Riley wouldn't come. And the other two, you're kind of like, well, are you as convinced as you were a few weeks ago? And you think, wow, is someone like Doug Peterson exciting enough? And, I think I said in a comment earlier in the week, someone like Dan Quinn wouldn't get me excited whatsoever at all. But yet, of all the assistant coaches in the league right now, Dallas's defense is actually pretty good. And I saw it again tonight and restricted the Chiefs despite the fact they had no pass rushers playing. So maybe there's just not those offensive options there, and it is going to have to be somebody who can be an overseer and just get great coordinators in. I'm not sure. It's a big question. We've got this from Curly Hair Messiah, who says, anyone ever noticed that every loss we've enjoyed this season, instead of talking about what happened on the field, we keep coming back to Pete versus Russ. Change is a must. It's true, isn't it, Robbie? We've not spent hardly any time
100%.
talking about the
Yeah, we
games.
never talk about the games anymore. We just talk about what's happening in the upcoming off season or what should happen. We
But
don't talk
would
about
you?
the games.
I mean, obviously today's a unique thing, isn't it? Because obviously I've not. Usually I would be glued. This is the first Seahawks game that I've not had full focus on in. I can't tell you, Robbie. It's probably 15 years since I've not watched a full Seahawks game all the way through. I mean, I stay up and watch them all because of work reasons. That I've watched it. And do you know what? Can I just say this as well? Because on the point of this, I was really disappointed watching this game. It was. I felt really deflated. I think there's some people probably think, Robbie, because I talk about what I talk about on the blog and with you in these streams, and to some extent, you've joined me in a lot of these thoughts that you agree with a lot of what we've been talking about. That I think people think that I'm enjoying this. Somebody sent me a tweet about 10 days ago saying, "You want this so that you can be validated." Absolutely not. I was watching this and I really wanted the Seahawks to win. I don't want to drift through the next 7 weeks wishing it to be over. If they'd have won this game, I might have been able to just muster a bit of energy for the following game and thought, if they win this, and you start looking at it, don't you? You think, if they just win here, and if they just win here, you never know. Whereas like now, there's no hope. There's nothing. We just want the end. And that's dreadful. And I want to enjoy Seahawks football. And I want them to win. I don't want to be proven right. I want to be proven emphatically wrong. But I'm sorry. The truth is that everything that we've said for the last 2 years has come to the fore. It's come to the fore. And I'm not happy about it. I'm really pissed off about it. But it is what it is. All of this has been predictable, hasn't it, Robbie?
I mean, we've been talking about these exact issues for the last 2 years. The only thing that's changed really is like we went from, when we first started out, we were talking about the defensive line and then, the pass rush and then how that didn't get fixed. And then we were talking about the cornerback position. It just seems like everything has been progressing. But we talked about this early last year. Watch out for the noise about Russell Wilson is not a joke. And then all of a sudden it turned out to be a big thing this offseason, and it's not going to go away,
Now, do you know what they should do? They should turn the tables on New Orleans, which is where Russell Wilson's going to want to go. And they should try and get Sean Payton to come here to work with Russell Wilson rather than letting Russell Wilson go over to New Orleans. That's never going to happen. But imagine.
We'll give him Jamal Adams for it.
Yeah, please. Nate says, I imagine Jerry Jones would fire Mike McCarthy before he would let go of Kellen Moore. That's an interesting point because he's kind of done that before, hasn't he? Was it Wade Phillips, who he removed and so that they could secure Jason Garrett as a head coach? I wonder if he would do something similar like that to protect Kellen Moore. To be honest, I'd give Kellen Moore a bash. I'd be willing to see what Kellen Moore can do as a head coach. I would, and here's the other thing, Robbie. I'd quite happily be a kind of team that fires a head coach after a year or every 2 years to find the right guy. If you give Kellen Moore a go and it ain't working, do a Jim Moore. Move on. Go and find the next one. Just keep doing that. You don't have to give a coach 5-6 years. And if you've noticed in college football, half of college football is looking for a new head coach right now. Florida fired Dan Mullen earlier. It seems like everybody's just firing coaches. You get 3-4 years now to turn around a program. You don't get 20 years anymore. It's like, no, TCU's fired Gary Patterson. Everybody's out. Like Fuentes has gone in Virginia Tech. Everybody's looking for a head coach, it seems, right now, apart from the obvious candidates. And maybe the Seahawks have to be a bit like that. Maybe they just have to be like, yeah, do you know what? We've got to sort of sift through this, and we might have to make a few mistakes finding the next head coach to get it right. Maybe that's the way it's going to be. But I really long for the days that we talk about the games again and don't talk about the future. But there is only one topic in town, and that is the future. And eventually, people like Mike Salk, when he interviews Pete Carroll tomorrow, they're going to have to ask Pete Carroll about the future. They can't be asking about DK Metcalf hugging a goalpost tomorrow like he did last week. There's got to be some very serious questions about the future direction of this. We've got another super chat from Charles. How did Jamal Adams play today, Robbie? I was at work, so I didn't get a chance to pay much attention. Floor is yours, Robbie. How did he play?
I mean, okay, so I'll give Jamal a credit for, let's say, the first half of the game. He looked pretty good. I thought he was, all over the field making tackles. And then there was one play, and I think I can find it, and I'll post it on here.
Hang on a minute, Robbie. I've got something breaking news.
Oh.
Pete Carroll is back at the podium. And this is just starting to turn into a shambles. Apparently, Carroll has come. This is from Stacey Rost's Twitter. Carroll came back a bit apologetic and a little more lighthearted. Joked that the PR staff informed him there may be a few unanswered questions. So, just to recap, Pete Carroll has stopped the press conference after 7 minutes, stormed off and said he's done. And then about half an hour later, has come back to the podium. What the heck is got? It's embarrassing, Robbie. This is embarrassing. If you're going to storm off the podium and say I'm done, that's
then,
it.
Then be done.
Be done. You've got tomorrow. You're going to speak tomorrow to Mike Salt, and you're going to do a press conference. You can't storm off and come back. It's becoming embarrassing. It's becoming a shambles. It is a shambles.
Yeah, I mean, that.
This is not how a football team operates. I'm sorry.
No, and this is uncharacteristic for Pete, right? I mean, so this is like where you start looking at things and you're like, okay, he's doing things differently. Maybe this is the end of the line. Maybe he is just thinking he's done. I mean, I don't know. It's very un-Pete like, right? I mean, I don't really know. I don't really know what else to say.
It's always been kind of chaotic with Pete. I just don't. I just think this is bad. I mean, honestly, I would tell the press team. I'd say don't bother. I think that this is not a good look. Bringing him back, doing this. My advice in a situation like this would be, I think that was a mistake, him coming back. Unless he's come back with a whole bunch of answers, Robbie, as to why they're useless on third down and why the offense is a complete disaster zone, and he's going to talk about how he's going to retire in a few weeks, then by all means come back. But if he's just going to come back and go, I don't know what the answer is, I don't know anything, I can't answer that, there's no point coming back.
Back to Jamal Adams. So, Charles, I just posted something in the chat. It should be coming up here in a second. Just
here we
play
go.
That.
I'm disappointed I don't have any new answers for you. Well, then why are you there, Pete?
Why are you coming back, Pete? Oh, my gosh. Anyway. Yeah, I posted something. There's one play that I think just speaks volumes for how Jamal played. He kind of gave up and let Connor run into the end zone. So, I mean, how did he play? He didn't play like a guy that you should have given up 2 firsts, a third, and a player for. That's how he didn't play like that.
Yeah. John's given us a super chat. Thanks, John. Arizona got Chandler Jones for a 2 and a guard. Seattle paid 2 firsts, a third, and a player for a box safety. Wonder why Arizona is better. Yeah. Do you know what? I was watching the Cowboys and I had to do a bit of prep for this game, Robbie, and I was kind of looking through the roster. And I'm stating the obvious here, but they spent a lot of money. They spent a lot of money on Dak. They spent a lot of money on Zeke. They spent a lot of money on Amari Cooper. They spent a lot of money on a linebacker, Jalen Smith, who's not there anymore, and they're still paying that off. But you can afford to do all of those things when you draft very well. And they've hit on their draft picks. They found cheap talent. They found great depth with their depth at receiver is just insane. They've got 2 really good running backs. They have found tight ends in the range where Seattle picks tight ends, but never finds tight ends the way that they do. Their defensive backfield, or their secondary rather, with Trevon Diggs, and they'll get Keanu Neal for an absolute bargain, and they fill players in, and they get great value in their draft picks and their veterans signings, and that's why they're 7-3. That's why they're going to be in the playoffs. That's why they're a decent shout for the number 1 seed in the NFC. That's why they've got a chance at the Super Bowl, because they've built correctly. Seattle doesn't do any of those things. I just really hope that, because Curtis is posting the quotes here, and I'm waiting for one question to pop up where someone's got the guts to ask him about whether this feels like the end of an era, because that is a fair question to ask, and I don't know why anybody wouldn't ask that, Robbie. It's a reasonable question that gets asked of all coaches eventually. Even Belichick's going to face that question at some point. Well, maybe not Belichick, because I think everyone's scared of him. But other coaches, usually there comes a point. Some it happens within weeks of them taking over. Some it happens years after they take over. Somebody needs to say, does this feel like the end of an era is near? I'd love to hear what he has to say about that. I don't think Pete could be angry at that question or could feel any animosity to anybody who asked that question. That's what it feels like. Ask it.
Might as well. Shoot. Well, maybe Mike will do it tomorrow. I doubt it, but maybe he'll ballsy up and ask the question, Pete, do you feel like this is the end?
It definitely won't happen. It definitely won't happen. Right, let's do a Q&A. Right, okay. So just to finish off, we usually do an hour, don't we, Robbie? So that's 5 minutes here. Anybody's got a question, send it in. Super chats are much appreciated, but if you don't want to do that, fine. Just send a Q&A in. Send us a question. We'll rattle through some of these to finish off.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
If you don't send any questions, then we're going to be in trouble because now I'm on my own. So Robbie's going off. This one here from Carey. Rob, what is the positional strength of the 2022 draft? It's tight ends, Carey. There are a lot of tight ends in this draft that you can go and target, and sadly, that is not a particularly strong position of need for the Seahawks right now. You know, I always feel like drafting a tight end early is kind of a thing you do as a finishing touch. Now, maybe the Seahawks will need one. Gerald Everett's contract is up, I think. It was a 1-year deal. Disley's contract, I think, is up at the end of this year. Colby Parkinson's not really shown anything, so maybe they will tap into the quality of that position in the draft. But you know, it's a hard sell, isn't it, to say we're going to dig right into a tight end class, because that's where the strength is in 2022. It's not particularly strong on the offensive line. It's not particularly strong on the defensive line, I'm afraid to say. Those are the kind of the areas that I would focus on for the Seahawks. There are a few running backs that are interesting, and I think there are some players that are going to be available mid to late rounds that are very interesting. But no, it's not strong in the areas that you would hope for. Justin says Salk will ask about the Kraken before a hard question. Well, maybe. Brando says, who is your favorite player in the draft? That is a difficult question to answer off the top of my head. Who is the favorite player in the draft? Oh, I'm gonna have to think about that one. Do you know what, Robbie? I'll come on to another question that you can answer, and I'll have a think, because I want to answer that properly. So Isaac says, when does Waldron get some blame, or is it all on Carroll? Waldron deserves some blame, but what do you think, Robbie?
Yeah, Waldron deserves some blame too, and being a first-year play caller, I imagine it's probably pretty hard calling plays under Pete. You know, he has a lot of say in things that are going to happen, but I think he deserves a lot of criticism as well. Like, he should be able to come in and have some sort of creativity, and I mean, I feel like, you know, some of these play calls have just been. I thought the first game that against the Colts was his best game, and he called it. I thought it looked creative. I saw a lot of shifts, a lot of moving parts. I don't really see that anymore. I haven't saw it much. So I guess for me, I think he deserves a lot of credit. He ain't going to be here beyond this season either. If Pete goes, he's gone for sure. And I think we'll be looking at a new offensive coordinator next year.
Favorite player in the draft? I should have thought of this straight away. Jordan Davis, defensive tackle at Georgia, is a player that I've been talking about for an awful long time, and like everything about him. But because that's quite a predictable answer, because he's one of the best players in the draft. A couple of other names that I really like are obviously Zach Charbonnet, the running back at UCLA. Big fan of his. Greg Dulcich, the tight end at UCLA. Really like Haskell Garrett, the defensive tackle at Ohio State. Jameson Williams, the wide receiver at Alabama. And is there any others that I want to mention? Derek Deese, the tight end at San Jose State. Traylon Burks, the wide receiver at Arkansas. These are all guys I really like. I could name about another 50 though. So we will get into all of that, don't worry, down the line. Let's get to some more questions then. Would you hire a GM or a coach first? Assuming both Pete and John are fired. It depends who the coach is for me, Robbie.
I say GM. We saw it worked well, I guess, with Pete getting hired first and bringing on John. But in my opinion, I think you go GM, let him kind of decide. Let the GM actually be the GM and let the coach be the coach. If you bring in the coach, then they have a say in who I feel like, again, then he has more say over the GM. I'd rather bring the GM, let them have more say in it. That would be my vote.
Better be a good GM though, whoever it is. You know, go and get somebody from the Colts staff, or one of these teams that have drafted well recently. Don't go and get it from New England. The New England pipeline, they don't get to bring Belichick with them. Maybe they should go and get Bill Belichick. Maybe that would have been possible a couple of years ago. Now he's got Matt Jones. It's probably not going to be possible. But Big Mike says we need guys in the trenches and a running back. I totally agree. That's where they should put all of their focus really. Because with DK and Tyler and Russell, you can throw the ball. But they don't beat anybody up front, and they don't run the ball very well. Let's have a look. Any more questions? Do we pay Metcalf or not from Rodney? Is that more of a question now, Robbie, than it was a few weeks ago? I mean, I still think that you don't get to being good again by getting rid of the few players that you've got that are really good. But Metcalf's too inconsistent. His hands are not getting any better. Yeah. And he hasn't taken a huge step forward. He's always going to be good because of his physicality. But I just wonder a little bit if you could get a haul of picks for him rather than making him the highest paid receiver in the NFL. And if you could bunch him off to a team with a great quarterback who would be willing just to try and go all out, maybe someone like the Chargers or someone like that, who might be willing to give you a couple of first-round picks to put him with Justin Herbert. I know they've got Mike Williams, who's had a decent year, but he's always injured. Do you consider doing that and stop the picks? I mean, I guess if Russell Wilson goes, you might as well do that as well, haven't you? You might as well get rid of DK Metcalf and have potentially 5 first-round picks and go all in on the rebuild at that point.
Yeah, I say if you get rid of Russ, then you get rid of everybody and you try to just rebuild and get as many picks as possible. I think you end up paying DK though.
Shocked we didn't get it done, says Pete. Yeah. I'm tired of hearing these answers now. I think this is the worst bit for me, Robert. It's almost worse than the games. It's the total lack of answers and the repeated BS that you hear afterwards. I just didn't see this game coming. Shocked we didn't get it done. Can't believe we're not better than this. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. Russ needs some blame. He's broken, says Lewis. He goes deep outside or gets sacked. He totally ignores the middle. He deserves a lot of the blame. He does deserve some blame. No one would say that he doesn't deserve some blame. But I think people forget that we're talking about a Hall of Fame quarterback here who did a lot of the things that people say he's not done for years. And he carried the Seahawks and he was getting 40 touchdowns and, 5,000 yards. Players like that just become bad because they have a slightly frustrating half of a season at the end of last year. And this has been a complete disaster from start to finish this season for everybody. So there we go. Curly Hair Messiah says, how long does it take for us to be optimistic about this franchise again? I will say, Robbie, as soon as it's made clear that changes are happening.
Agreed. 100%. I mean, I think we'll be optimistic once we see a new change in the regime. I think that's kind of what we're looking for.
Isaac, if we replace Carroll and Schneider, who do you want to replace them? I do not have a GM answer to mind, and I struggle for that. There is not one head coach candidate that say, I want them. I can give you sort of 5-6 names, and we've probably talked about them already on this stream. But there isn't anybody really who completely stands out for me. Robbie, is there anybody who stands out for you?
No, I can't think of anybody.
Big thank you to Zorn76 for the $20 super chat. If 2021 witnesses the end of the Pete and John show, then the season will be a success. You know what? I don't really disagree with that. I think the way it's playing out, maybe it is for the best rather than a 10-7 or 11-6 Robbie and another playoff exit. Because people could say, well, they made the playoffs again. Do you really want to get rid of that? It kind of has to be so bad that change happens at this point, I think, even though it's going to be frustrating as heck to see every single mock draft between now and the end of the season with the bloody Jets in the top 10 twice because the Seahawks gave them an extra first-round pick. We can't even talk about that. We can't even talk about a top 10 pick, Robbie. I can't even run through, hey, Derek Stingley's good for this. I've not been able to do that for years. And how many times I've run through all these top 10 picks, these prospects that are going to go in the top 10, all these players who rise from like nowhere and they're coming in the top 10 and we go, well, they're not going to be able to draft them, but here's why they're good. And we could be talking about those guys now as in, we're going to see him in Seattle next year. But no, they couldn't even let us have that. They couldn't even do that for us. We've got to just watch the peacock. Rodney says, do you all think Pete and John are feeling the fire or not? Yes, they're feeling the fire. They're feeling the pressure. I think that the Wilson, I've said this before, the Wilson saga really knocked them for 6. And I think that Pete will retire. And I'm not convinced that John will carry on as well. I think he may step down. I think there'll be golden handshakes aplenty at the end of this season. Let's run through some last few weeks. We've done an hour now. Justin says, who is the most likely Pro Bowler on the downside of their career that will trade our 2022 second and 23 first for? Oh,
yeah, I hope not.
It'd be funny if it wasn't so realistic. Mike says, so what did Rob do for the BBC coverage, play-by-play, analysis, something else? So there's two of us co-hosting. I had the great pleasure of doing it with Darren Fletcher, who's one of the very big names in broadcasting in England. He does all of the major soccer games, the Champions League games and the Premier League games over here. And he and I co-hosted it. We hand over to the commentary because, of course, as you can see, I'm not in Arrowhead Stadium. I'm in a studio. And we hand over to the American commentary. And then when the ad breaks are going on, because it's the BBC doesn't have ad breaks over it. It's public broadcasting. So we don't have any adverts on the TV or radio. We talk about the games. We talked about the other games. We debated certain things to do with the NFL, and then we hand back to that. That's what the show is over here. Big Mike asked, could we get a first for DK? I still think you could get 2 firsts for DK Metcalf. I think someone would take that chance.
Yeah.
And look, he's not had a great year, but I think somebody would go that distance. If Jamal Adams can get you 2 firsts.
Yeah.
This one here from Mike was saying, Robbie, dip your shoulder so we can see your dog.
I did. I moved out of the way. I did a little.
Let's give the dog a shout. What's the dog's name?
This is Coda.
Coda.
She can't hear.
See that? Yeah, the little tail was going there. There we go.
There you go.
My dogs will be fast asleep.
Yeah.
Right now. My dogs will be fast asleep in the kitchen right now. Charles, you are a legend, my friend. Thank you so much for another super chat. I will say, as disappointing as the Hawks are, it's nice to be able to make a buck off them in gambling due to their predictably poor performances. Awesome dog, Robbie, says Charles there. Thank you, Charles. Fantastic. Big Mike joining in the dog love here. At least we found something to be positive about.
There you go.
Mike says Wilson to Vegas for Carr on their first and second next season. Drafted QB 2022. I'm not a big fan of that. I think if you're going to trade Wilson, then I think you have to play the long game a little bit here. And that's why I don't want to trade Russell Wilson. But I don't want to just try and swap it for Derek Carr. And if you're going to, swap for a veteran, go and get Aaron Rodgers. Zorn76 says Pete's in La La Land. Rodney says we need Holmgren as GM. No, we don't. I'm sorry. I love Mike Holmgren, but I don't want him as GM. Let's see if there's anything else before we wrap up. I don't think there is. I think that is it. There's one more here from Isaac. What happened to Russ running the ball? The offense was at its best when he used his legs. There's no fear of that anymore. Yeah, that has become less of a thing. I still think that Russ could run, and he has shown the ability to run as he did in that last game before they snatched away the first down, which was questionable. But it's definitely not as much as a feature as it has been. Mike, thank you for that last-minute super chat as well. Listen, guys, thank you for everything. It means a lot that you support this stream as much as you do. The viewing figures have been fantastic for the live broadcast this year, and the super chats have been very generous and greatly appreciated. And thank you for putting up with the fact that I didn't actually watch the game from start to finish and been rambling on about the Seahawks despite that. And Robbie, a big thank you to you as well for your continued views and opinions and support as well for the channel. It's great to always talk Seahawks with you, and even though we're having to endure this horrible season, at least we're having to endure it together.
Indeed. I don't know if you can hear that, but my children are freaking out, so I'm going to go ahead and drop.
Robbie, great to hear from you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy that.
All right, everyone.
Go and be a good dad.
All right. We'll take care.
See you later. See you later, Robbie. And thank you to you all. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, spread the word, spread the message around, get behind the channel here and tweet it, Facebook it, whatever you do, however you share it, put it on Reddit. And we'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you soon.